The Arizona desert sun blazed mercilessly through the windows of Desert Springs Care Center in Phoenix, casting long shadows across the common room, where Eleanor Martinez sat in her wheelchair, watching the parking lot with the intensity of a hawk. At 81, her dark eyes had lost none of their sharpness, even if her body had failed her after the stroke 6 months ago. "Mrs. Martinez, it's time for your physical therapy," announced Cheryl, a perpetually cheerful aide who treated all the residents like children. "Not today," Eleanor replied in her heavily accented English, her voice still strong despite everything else that had weakened. "I'm waiting for someone." "Your son, Michael?" "Honey, we've talked about this. He's very busy with his medical practice. I'm sure he'll visit when he can." Eleanor's jaw tightened. Michael hadn't just missed visits. He'd stopped answering her calls entirely. 3 months of silence since he dropped her off here, promising he'd figure out a better arrangement once his divorce was finalized and his new practice was established. "Not Michael," Eleanor said quietly. "The woman in blue." Cheryl followed Eleanor's gaze to where a woman in her 40s was walking across the parking lot, carrying a bouquet of bright orange marigolds. She wore a simple blue sundress and moved with the purposeful stride of someone who belongs somewhere important. "Oh, you mean Sophia? She's lovely, isn't she? Comes every Tuesday like clockwork." Eleanor nodded, her expression softening for the first time all day. "She brings my favorite flowers. Marigolds. In Mexico, we call them Sempascal. My grandmother used to say they guide lost souls home." For the past 2 months, this stranger had appeared every Tuesday afternoon with fresh flowers and a gentle smile. She never stayed long, just placed the flowers in Eleanor's room and asked how she was feeling. Sometimes she brought books in Spanish or pan dulce from a Mexican bakery across town. Always, she treated Eleanor with the respect and attention that her own son seemed too busy to provide. "Mrs. Martinez," Cheryl said gently, "have you asked Sophia how she knows you? I mean, she's not on your approved visitor list as family." Eleanor shrugged. "Some people are family by choice, not blood." Through the window, Eleanor watched Sophia approach the entrance. Today, something seemed different about her. She walked more slowly, clutching the flowers tighter, and her usually bright expression looked troubled. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Martinez," Sophia said as she entered the common room, but Eleanor noticed her voice lacked its usual warmth. "Mija," Eleanor said, using the term of endearment that came naturally despite their being strangers. "You look sad today. What's wrong?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she knelt beside Eleanor's wheelchair. "Mrs. Martinez, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you weeks ago." Eleanor felt her heart rate quicken. In her 81 years, she'd learned that conversations beginning this way rarely ended well. "Tell me, child." Sophia took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she held out the marigolds. "My name is Sophia Reyes. I'm a nurse at Phoenix General Hospital." "That's nice, Mija. Are you changing jobs? Is that why you're upset?" "No, Mrs. Martinez. I'm upset because I was there. I was there the night you had your stroke." Eleanor's world seemed to tilt. The night of her stroke was mostly a blur, falling in her kitchen while making dinner, waking up in a hospital unable to move her left side, Michael's stressed face hovering over her hospital bed explaining why she couldn't go home. "I don't understand," Eleanor whispered. Sophia's tears began to fall in earnest. "You were brought in by ambulance around 11 p.m. Alone. No family. No emergency contacts that we could reach immediately. You were conscious but scared, speaking in Spanish, asking for your son. I was your intake nurse." The memory began to crystallize for Eleanor, a young woman with kind eyes who had held her hand and spoke to her in Spanish while the doctors ran their tests. "You stayed with me," Eleanor remembered suddenly. "When I was frightened, you held my hand and told me everything would be okay." "I did, but that's not all." Sophia's voice broke. "Mrs. Martinez, when your son finally arrived the next morning, I heard him talking to the doctors in the hallway. He was angry, not about your condition, but about the timing. He kept saying it was the worst possible moment, that he had too much going on with his divorce and his new practice." Eleanor felt something cold settle in her stomach. She'd always known Michael was under stress, but she'd assumed his distance was temporary, born of overwhelming circumstances rather than resentment. "There's more," Sophia continued. "I heard him ask the social worker about long-term care options. Not temporary rehabilitation, Mrs. Martinez. Permanent placement. The doctor said you could recover most of your functions with proper therapy and family support, but he said he couldn't provide that support." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She'd spent 3 months believing Michael's promise that her stay at Desert Springs was temporary, that he was working on bringing her home. But he'd known from the beginning that this was forever. "Why are you telling me this?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because," Sophia said, her tears flowing freely now, "I've been a nurse for 15 years, and I've never forgotten a patient who looked at me the way you did that night, with such hope, such trust that your family would take care of you. And I've been watching you here for months, sitting by this window, waiting for phone calls that never come, holding on to hope that maybe isn't real." Eleanor sat in silence, processing this revelation. The flowers in her lap suddenly felt heavier, their bright orange blooms a stark contrast to the darkness settling over her heart. "Mrs. Martinez," Sophia said gently, "I know I'm just a stranger, and I have no right to interfere in your family's business. But I couldn't keep watching you wait for someone who's already made his decision. So you came here to break an old woman's heart completely?" "No," Sophia said firmly. "I came here because I believe you deserve to know the truth, and because I believe you deserve better than sitting in a window waiting for someone who's already moved on with his life." Eleanor looked at this young woman who had appeared in her life like an angel, bringing flowers and truth in equal measure. "What do you think I should do with this information, Mija?" "I think," Sophia said, standing up and smoothing her blue dress, "that you should stop waiting for your son to remember that he loves you and start remembering that you're worth loving." As Sophia prepared to leave, Eleanor called out to her, "Will you still come on Tuesdays?" Sophia turned back with a sad smile. "Mrs. Martinez, I'll come every Tuesday for as long as you want me to, but not because you need someone to feel sorry for you, because you deserve to have someone in your life who shows up." After Sophia left, Eleanor sat in the common room as the Arizona sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and pink that matched her marigolds. For the first time in 6 months, she wasn't thinking about when Michael might call. She was thinking about what it meant to have someone choose to be part of your life, rather than someone who treated your existence as an obligation. The truth hurt more than she'd expected, but somehow it also felt like the beginning of something new. 3 days after Sophia's revelation, Eleanor Martinez made a decision that surprised everyone at Desert Springs Care Center, including herself. Instead of her usual post by the window, she wheeled herself to the activities room and announced to the recreation coordinator that she wanted to join the Spanish conversation group. "Mrs. Martinez," exclaimed Carlos, the group leader and a retired high school teacher from Tucson, "we've been hoping you'd join us for months." "I've been waiting for other things," Eleanor said simply. "Now I'm ready to focus on what's actually happening in my life." The group of 6 elderly Latino residents welcomed her warmly, and for the first time since her stroke, Eleanor found herself laughing. Really laughing. Maria Gutierrez, a spunky 78-year-old from El Paso, was regaling them with stories about her attempts to teach her great-granddaughter to make tamales via FaceTime. The poor girl put corn husks in the blender. Maria cackled. "I told her, Mija, the internet can teach you many things, but it cannot teach you Abuela's hands." Eleanor found herself sharing her own stories about growing up in Guadalajara, about coming to Phoenix as a young bride in 1963, about building a life in a new country while maintaining the traditions of the old one. She talked about everything except Michael. After the group session, Cheryl approached her with curiosity. "Mrs. Martinez, you seem different today. More present." "I am more present," Eleanor replied. "I've been living in the past and the future, but not in today. Today I'm here. Does this have anything to do with your visitor on Tuesday?" Sophia seemed upset when she left. Eleanor considered how much to share. "She told me some truths that were hard to hear, but sometimes hard truths are better than comfortable lies." That afternoon, Eleanor did something she hadn't done since arriving at Desert Springs. she called someone other than Michael. She called her old neighbor, Rosa Mendez, who had been her closest friend for 20 years before the stroke changed everything. Eleanor? Dios mío, I've been so worried about you. Michael told me you were getting better, but that you needed quiet to recover. Eleanor felt a familiar pang of anger at her son's deception, but pushed it aside. Rosa, I'm much better, and I'd love to see you if you're able to visit. Visit? Eleanor, I've been wanting to visit for months. Michael said the doctors recommended limited visitors while you recovered. I respected that, but it's been killing me. Another lie. Another way Michael had isolated her, cutting her off in the relationships that might have sustained her through this difficult time. The doctors never said that. Rosa, Michael did, but I'm saying differently now. Would you like to come this Saturday? We have a beautiful garden here. Rosa's voice brightened immediately. I'll be there with bells on. And I'm bringing Magdalena's Tres Leches cake, the one you always loved. After hanging up, Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation for something that had nothing to do with Michael's attention. On Saturday, Rosa arrived with not just cake, but with 3 other women from their old neighborhood, Carmen, Esperanza, and Dolores. They descended on Desert Springs like a colorful tornado, bringing homemade food, gossip, laughter, and the kind of unconditional love that Eleanor had forgotten existed. Mira, Eleanor, Rosa said, settling into a chair beside Eleanor's wheelchair in the garden. You look better than I expected, but sadder than you should. What's really going on? Eleanor found herself telling them everything. About Michael's silence, about Sophia's revelation, about the months she'd spent waiting for phone calls that were never coming. Ese cabron, muttered Esperanza, using language that would have shocked their parish priest, but perfectly captured their collective feelings about Michael's behavior. Esperanza, gasped Carmen, but without much conviction. No, she's right, Rosa said firmly. Eleanor, I love you like a sister, and I loved Michael like a nephew when he was growing up. But what he's doing is wrong. You raised that boy to be better. Maybe I didn't raise him well enough, Eleanor said quietly. Don't you dare, Dolores spoke up. Dolores was a quiet one of the group, but when she spoke, everyone listened. I watched you raise that boy. You worked 2 jobs to put him through medical school. You took care of his father when he was dying. You were at every graduation, every celebration, every moment that mattered. If Michael has forgotten that, it's not because you failed as a mother. It's because he's failing as a son. The women spent the afternoon sharing stories, catching Eleanor up on neighborhood news, and treating her like the person she'd always been rather than the invalid she felt like. When they finally had to leave, Rosa hugged her tight. Eleanor, we're going to come every Saturday from now on. And if you want to call us during the week, you call us. You're not alone in this place unless you choose to be. That evening, as Eleanor sat in her room arranging the fresh flowers Sophia had brought on Tuesday, white roses this time, which Sophia had said represented new beginnings, she made another decision. She was going to call Michael, not to beg for his attention, but to tell him exactly what she thought of his choices. She dialed his number, and for once, he answered. Mom, is everything okay? Did something happen? His immediate assumption that she was calling because of an emergency rather than because she was his mother spoke volumes. Hello, Michael. I'm fine. I'm calling because I think it's time we had an honest conversation. Mom, I know I haven't been able to visit much, but with the divorce and the practice... Michael, Eleanor interrupted, her voice carrying the authority she'd used when he was a child testing boundaries. I know you never intended for me to come home. Silence on the other end of the line. I know you made the decision to put me here permanently before my doctors even finished their evaluation. I know you told people I needed limited visitors when what I really needed was connection. And I know you've been avoiding my calls because you feel guilty about abandoning me. Mom, that's not... I'm not finished. Eleanor's voice was steady, strong. For 3 months, I sat by the window waiting for you to remember that you love me. I made excuses for you, blamed your circumstances, convinced myself that you were just overwhelmed and would come around. I do love you, Mom. Maybe you do, but love without action is just a feeling, Michael, and I'm done waiting for your feelings to translate into behavior. More silence. I have friends now, Michael. Real friends who show up. I have activities that make me happy. I have a life here that doesn't depend on your approval or attention. So when you're ready to be my son again, really be my son, not just feel guilty about not being my son, you call me. Until then, I'm going to stop calling you. Mom, wait. I love you, Michael. I always will. But I'm done letting your choices define my happiness. Eleanor hung up and sat in the gathering darkness of her room, surrounded by white roses and the quiet satisfaction of finally speaking her truth. For the first time in months, she wasn't waiting for her phone to ring. She was looking forward to Tuesday, when Sophia would come with flowers and genuine care. She was looking forward to Saturday, when Rosa and the ladies would fill the garden with laughter. She was looking forward to tomorrow, when she could choose how to spend her time instead of spending it all hoping for something that might never come. Michael had put her in this place, but Eleanor Martinez was finally home. 2 weeks had passed since Eleanor's conversation with Michael, and she was surprised to discover that not waiting for his calls had freed up considerable mental space for other things. She'd started attending the center's book club, where they were reading like water for chocolate in Spanish. She'd begun working with the physical therapist more aggressively, determined to regain as much independence as possible. Most importantly, she'd stopped measuring her days by Michael's absence and started measuring them by her own presence. On a particularly warm Tuesday in November, Eleanor was in the garden helping Esperanza, who had started volunteering at the center, plant winter flowers when Cheryl approached with an unusual expression. "Mrs. Martinez, you have a visitor. Someone I don't recognize." Eleanor looked up from the marigolds they were planting. Sophia had brought her seeds so she could grow her own. "Is it Sophia? She's early today." "No, it's a man. Says he's a friend of your son's." Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. In the 2 weeks since her ultimatum to Michael, he called twice brief, awkward conversations where he clearly wanted to address what she'd said, but couldn't find the words. She hoped he hadn't sent someone else to plead his case. Did he give his name? Dr. James Rodriguez. He said he works with Michael. Eleanor had never heard Michael mention a Dr. Rodriguez, but she nodded to Cheryl. "I'll see him in the common room." Esperanza gave her hand an encouraging squeeze. "Wanting to stay nearby, in case you need backup?" Eleanor smiled at her friend's protective instincts. "I think I can handle one doctor." Dr. Rodriguez turned out to be a man in his early 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who spent more time thinking about patients than personal grooming. He stood when Eleanor entered the common room, extending his hand respectfully. "Mrs. Martinez, thank you for agreeing to see me. I'm James Rodriguez. I work with your son at Phoenix General." Eleanor studied his face, trying to read his intentions. "Are you here on Michael's behalf?" "Not exactly." James gestured to a chair across from Eleanor's wheelchair. "May I sit? This is a conversation I've been wanting to have for some time." "Please." James settled into the chair, his expression growing serious. "Mrs. Martinez, I don't know if Michael has mentioned me, but I've been working closely with him for the past 8 months. He's an excellent physician, brilliant, dedicated, the kind of doctor who pushes himself to be perfect." Eleanor nodded politely, unsure where this was leading. "But," James continued, "he's also been struggling. The divorce, the pressure of establishing his practice, and, well, his guilt about your situation." "His guilt?" Eleanor's voice carried a slight edge. "Mrs. Martinez, I hope you don't mind me being direct, but I know about the circumstances of your placement here. Not for Michael. He never talks about personal matters at work. But I have a friend who works here. Sophia Reyes." Eleanor's eyes widened. "You know Sophia?" "She's my cousin, and she's been worried about you for months. She told me about your situation, about how you were waiting for Michael to visit, about the conversation you two had." Eleanor felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together. She never mentioned having family at the hospital. Sophia doesn't usually talk about work relationships in personal contexts. But when she told me about you and described her son, I realized she was talking about my colleague. It's not that unusual. Phoenix has a large medical community, and we all tend to cross paths. So you've come to, what? Explain Michael's behavior? James shook his head. Actually, I've come to apologize for it, and to tell you something that Michael should have told you himself months ago. Eleanor braced herself for another difficult truth. Mrs. Martinez, when you had your stroke, Michael was in the middle of a very complicated time. His wife had just filed for divorce, accusing him of being more married to his work than to her. His new practice was struggling financially. He was sleeping in his office most nights and living on coffee and stress. Many people have difficult times without abandoning their parents. You're absolutely right, and that's what I told him. James's voice grew firm. Mrs. Martinez, Michael talks about you at work more than he probably realizes. When he's dealing with elderly patients, he often mentions things you taught him, wisdom you shared. When we have difficult family cases, he draws on experiences from his childhood with you. Eleanor felt her throat tighten despite herself. But he's also paralyzed by shame. He knows he made the wrong choices in those first crucial weeks after your stroke. He knows he prioritized his own crisis over your needs. And now, he doesn't know how to fix it without admitting how badly he failed you. So he continues to fail me instead. Yes, which is why I'm here. James leaned forward. Mrs. Martinez, I'm not asking you to forgive Michael or to make his guilt easier to bear. What he did was wrong, and the consequences of his choices are his to live with. But I am asking you to consider something. What? Michael told me that you called him 2 weeks ago and essentially fired him as a son. Eleanor smiled grimly. I told him I was done waiting for him to act like one. Right. And do you know what he did the next day? Eleanor waited. He came to my office and cried for an hour. Michael Martinez, the man who performs surgery with steady hands and deals with medical crises without blinking, sat in my office and cried because he finally understood that he'd lost the most important relationship in his life. Despite herself, Eleanor felt her heart soften slightly. He asked me what he should do, how he could possibly make up for months of neglect and selfishness. I told him the same thing I'm going to tell you, that some mistakes can be forgiven, but only if both people are willing to do the hard work of rebuilding trust. And what did he say? He said he was afraid you'd never forgive him, that he'd waited too long to make things right, that maybe it was better for you to have a life without his failures dragging you down. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Dr. Rodriguez, why are you telling me this? What do you hope to accomplish? Honestly, I'm not sure. Sophia asked me to talk to you because she was worried that you might be giving up on Michael at the exact moment when he's finally ready to face what he's done wrong. But I also came because I've watched Michael struggle for months with his guilt, and I think both of you might be suffering unnecessarily. What do you mean? I mean that Michael loves you deeply, but he's terrified of your disappointment. And you love him deeply, but you're tired of his cowardice. Maybe there's a middle ground where you can both get what you actually need. I've kept all these pictures, Anna said softly. Even when Dad and I weren't talking much, even when years went by without seeing you, I kept them because you were such an important part of my childhood. I'm a teacher now, Abuela, and when I have difficult students, I think about the patience you showed me. When I need to be strong, I remember the stories you told me about coming to America. Eleanor wiped her eyes, looking at faces from a past she thought was lost forever. There's something else, Michael said quietly. Mom, I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I want you to know that losing you has taught me something important about what really matters. I've left my practice. Eleanor looked up sharply. What? I've joined a community health clinic that serves low-income families. No more chasing money. No more putting career advancement ahead of everything else. I want to do the kind of medicine you taught me to value, helping people who really need it. Michael, I'm not telling you this to earn points or to make you proud of me. I'm telling you because I want you to know that your disappointment in me has been a wake-up call. I don't want to be the kind of person who abandons the people he loves when things get difficult. Eleanor sat quietly for several minutes, looking at the faces of these three people who had somehow found their way into her life through very different paths. Her son, seeking redemption, her granddaughter, offering reconnection, and Sophia, providing the steady presence that had sustained her through the darkest months. I want to go home, she said finally. "I want to go back to my house, to my garden, to my own bed, but I have conditions." "Anything," Michael said immediately. "First, I want regular visits from all of you. Not when it's convenient, not when you feel guilty, but because we're family, and that's what families do." "Done." "Second, I want honest communication. No more lies about what's best for me. No more controlling who I can see or talk to." "Absolutely." "Third," Eleanor looked directly at her son, "I want you to understand that coming home isn't the same as everything being forgiven. Trust has to be rebuilt, and that takes time." Michael nodded, tears flowing freely now. "I understand, Mom. I'm willing to do whatever it takes for as long as it takes." "And finally," Eleanor smiled, "I want Anna to come for Sunday dinners. Every Sunday. I have 20 years of granddaughter time to make up for." Anna laughed through her tears. "Every Sunday for the rest of my life, if you want." As the four of them sat in the Arizona sunshine, Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope for the future. Not the desperate hope that had sustained her through months of waiting, but the confident hope that comes from knowing you're surrounded by people who choose to be in your life. "Sophia," she said, "will you still bring me flowers?" "Every Tuesday," Sophia promised, "though now I can bring them to your own garden." "Michael, there's one more thing." "What's that, Mom?" "Next week, I want you to take me to visit the community clinic where you're working. I want to see this new path you've chosen." "I'd love that." Eleanor looked around at the three faces surrounding her. Different generations, different relationships, but all connected by the simple choice to show up for each other. She'd spent months waiting for her son to remember that he loved her. It turned out that what she really needed was for all of them, including herself, to remember that love is a choice you make every day, not just a feeling you carry in your heart. "Well," she said, reaching for Michael's hand, "I suppose we should start packing. I'm ready to go home." But as she said it, Eleanor realized that home wasn't really about the place. It was about the people who chose to build their lives with you, who showed up not just in the good times, but in the complicated, difficult, messy times when love requires more than just feelings. She was already home. She had been every Tuesday when Sophia arrived with flowers, every Saturday when Rosa brought laughter, and now, finally, she was home with her family too. Sometimes the best journeys are the ones that bring you back to where you started, but with the wisdom to recognize what was valuable all along.